Good afternoon, everybody. Start off by saying I'm honored and humbled that John Mayer and Steve Tisch would allow me to see this process through. I'd also like to thank Mike Kafka for the job he did here towards the end of the season. Obviously finished with 2 wins at the end. He did a phenomenal job keeping the guys together, competing, all the way to the finish there. To our fans, I understand, the wins haven't been, what the expectation is. And, I'm fortunate enough to be tasked with getting the organization and the franchise back where it belongs. And that's the goal as we move forward. We're going to start the search for the next head coach of the New York Giants. As soon as I leave here, that's what we're going to go start focusing on. And, we're going to get the right person to lead the franchise. And again, get us back to what the standard is. And that's competing for championships on a yearly basis. With that, I'll open up for questions.
Did you receive an extension, Joe?
I'm not going to get into my personal contract situation. As you've seen today, unfortunately, in the nature of the business, I'm not sure how much it really matters how many years you have on your contract or not, but I'm not going to get into my personal situation there.
Joe, a lot of the players today talked about craving for leadership with that head coach. How important is that aspect, and what does that really mean?
Yeah. The criteria for the next head coach, there's several criteria that we're going to look for. Leadership being an important element, in the head coaching, world. Football acumen will be important. Player development is very important. Having a plan for player development. We have a young quarterback. It's going to be important that there's a plan in terms of Jackson's development, holding people accountable, communication. There's a lot that goes into the head coach that, can fall under that leadership element. But those are some of the characteristics that we're going to be looking for in the next head coach.
Do you want somebody with head coaching experience already?
We're going to cast a wide net, and there's no directive that it has to be an offensive guy or defensive guy or special teams or college or whatever it may be. Having head coaching experience previously, we are going to try to find, or we are going to find, the best leader for the franchise.
Joe, we saw last year a couple young rookie quarterbacks flash but struggle overall with winning, whether it was Drake with New England, you saw Caleb with Chicago, teams that had the young nucleus of talent like you guys have, and then year 2 they got the coach and they took off. Do you see this as a similar situation, that you get the right coach and you can have similar success to what the Patriots have seen or the Bears have seen?
Yeah, Connor, that would be the goal. That would be ideal. That's a good question. And yeah, when you look at those franchises that did that, I believe New England was picking 4 and Jacksonville may have been at 5, and what teams are in the top 10 again. And those are 2 really good examples. And, Caleb Williams in Chicago, what they were able to do, each of those franchises brought in new head coaches and were able to turn it around rather quickly. And, Drake May's in the MVP, race right now. And, Caleb Williams, we obviously played against him and has had a really good year and playing at a high level. So, yeah, that's certainly an opportunity that you look at those franchises and how they put it together and the quick turnaround. And, in an ideal world, yeah, that would be it.
How do you think Jackson is viewed? Like, what's your initial impression from the outside when you're going through this process? And how do you think it's going to be a benefit to have him here?
Absolutely. Jordan, from the people I've talked to, the consensus, there are a lot of potential head coaching candidates that are excited about the opportunity here because of Jackson Dart.
What has ownership told you about in terms of what John and Steve and them, what kind of input they're going to have in terms of the coaching search, whether it's their decision or your final decision?
I didn't hear the first.
What have you heard from ownership in terms of kind of the power balance of who's going to make the final decision on coach between yourself and the owners?
Okay. So I've been doing a lot of research with some of my leadership group, not just me, but there's a few of us that have been doing a lot of research. We are gathering names, gathering information, providing that to ownership. We will all go through the interview process together, and collectively we'll come up with the who the next head coach of the New York Giants is going to be, and ultimately it's ownership's decision. But I imagine that's going to be a collaborative effort.
Who's going to be in the interviews?
Yes, ownership will be part of the interviews.
Yesterday, had you guys lost, you would have been had the number 1 pick in the draft, and I think we all know that means, being able to get a ton of draft capital in the trade from a quarterback needy team. Is there any part of you that laments winning either of the last 2 games?
No. I always want to win when we go out there. I mean, every time it's important. We haven't done enough winning, and I understand that, and that falls on me. But anytime you go out there, specifically against a division opponent, we hadn't beat the Cowboys. To go out there and do that was important. And again, we have a young group of players that need to learn how to win, and to go out and finish the way we did, we can carry that momentum into the offseason and hopefully carry that over into next season.
Joe, if there's anyone questioning why ownership retained you, obviously that's a question for ownership, but from your perspective, why do you deserve to be the person who gets to lead this forward here?
Yeah, Art, for me, it's, early on I made mistakes. I'm fortunate to have great ownership here where you're allowed to stub your toe and try to course correct. And over the last couple of years, we've been able to add a franchise quarterback. You've been able to add a number 1 receiver in Malik Neighbors, who, again, I'm looking forward to getting him back. And there are, the defensive line, the pass rushers. There's pieces in place that also make this an attractive job. So looking at where we're going, where the build is, what the plan is moving forward, and seeing the vision through is why I think that's the case, Art.
Do you have any, Joe, do you have any, will Jackson Dart be, he's not going to be in the interviews, obviously, but he's such an important part of this franchise. Will he ever get any input in some of this at some points?
Input? He might meet somebody, but I don't know about input. I love him, but he's 22 years old or 23, whatever he is, and he's got 1 year in the league. So could he potentially meet a candidate? Sure, but we'll make the decision ultimately.
Your presence will impact the head coaching search, and how will you manage it if there's a candidate who has a different preference for who they want to be GM?
Yeah, people talk about that because that's a rare instance that happened a year ago. I know what you're talking about, and that's not necessarily the case in every cycle. So talking to a lot of the representatives of potential head coaches, that has not come up one time, and doesn't appear to be anything that's going to deter from a coach wanting to take this job. There's actually, the opposite. There's a lot of excitement for, the opportunity. We have phenomenal ownership, the history of the team, and some of the young pieces that are in place along with some of the veterans.
Joe, when you were told you were being retained, what did ownership tell you about their expectations for 2026 and anything they wanted to see improved, or what was their message to you directly?
Yeah, Pat, there wasn't a directive. It was a plan, a plan in place. And when you're in my position, if you were here year 2, yeah, would it have been better? Of course. As a general manager, you always want to have a young quarterback and build the team around, a young quarterback with that. You get the advantage when they're on a rookie deal. So, talking about the pieces we have in place, the plan, where we're going to go from here, how we're going to approach the off season. It was more so that than what the expectations are or mandates to do X, Y, and Z must happen in 2026. We've had constant communication since the the press release when Dayball was released. There's never a come to hey, this is you're going to go forward with you. We've been operating, and I've been gathering information for the coaching search, and we have consistent communication on a daily basis. So that's how we continue to proceed.
How serious is Mike Kafka as a candidate?
He's going to get an interview, and he's done a good job. He's been on the interview for the last several weeks. Enjoyed working with Mike. His leadership. Offensively, he was able to still handle the play calling. I believe we ended up 13th in the league in offense. I think we were 30th last year. Fifth again, fifth in the run. Fifth in the league in rushing. So it was impressive. Again, that's when you put on that head coaching hat, and now you got to evaluate the defense too. Obviously made a change with Shane. That's difficult to do, and he handled all that, very well, and obviously impressive, 2 wins down the stretch here.
A lot of the top names rumored for head coaching candidates are defensive coordinators, defensive minded, and there's obviously a perception in the NFL that you can't hire a defensive coach because he can't develop a quarterback. He'll need a top offensive coordinator. Where do you fall on that whole debate?
Yeah, my previous stop in Buffalo, Sean McDermott's a hell of a defensive coach. He's a hell of a head coach, and we drafted Josh Allen. So there's a way for that to work. Vrabel maybe put him in that boat. They have Josh McDaniels. So there's ways for this to work, and I would also say not just the head coaching job in terms of this being an attractive destination, but if I'm an offensive coordinator and you look at, okay, they got a left tackle, they got a left guard, center coming back, they got a number one receiver, Theo Johnson's shown some promise. Hey, Scat, Tyrone Tracy, Jackson Dart, I could probably work with that defensively. They've got rushers, they've got Dexter Lawrence in the middle, Javon Holland, Paulson Adebo. I could probably work with that. So my expectation, hopefully, is we're going to get the right head coach that can also, bring in a very good staff, that being not just offense coordinator, defense coordinator, special teams, on down the line. So I think there'll be an attractiveness there as well.
Joe, how is this task to sort of fix these Giants different than the one that you stepped into 4 years ago when you took this job?
How is this? Say that again.
Like how is this? How is the? I guess how is the team changed? How is it different? Like, do you feel like you're starting from square one or?
No, I don't think we're starting from square one. Again, having the quarterback in place. Okay, when I got here, we didn't do Daniel's 5th-year option. There was some let's wait and see. He couldn't pass a physical when I got here, because he had the neck injury. So is he going to be healthy? Is he not going to be healthy? 2020, then going into 2023, we did the contract extension and that's who we were trying to build around. And then obviously had the injury, and that decision ultimately didn't work out, and we shifted. And we are here today with, Jackson Dart going into year 2. And you're not paying a quarterback that, the amount of money that, we had to invest in. And Daniel, when we made that decision, so we have salary cap flexibility. We have some young core pieces in place. And I know it's talked about at times, but if, Jackson Dart's on the open market, or Malik Neighbors or Abdul Carter, the deal with Andrew Thomas, that was done a couple years ago. It looks good in terms of the rankings. Dexter, Burns, I think Hutchinson just got 40 million. So I would say key pieces at core positions that on the open market are making an exponential amount of money. We're in a good position in those core positions, and we have draft capital, and we have some flexibility. So I like where we are moving forward. I'm excited about the young group we have, along with the veterans and the resources we have to improve over the offseason.
What did you learn about
when you were scouting and evaluating and acquiring players when Brian was here, I imagine it was for what he wanted to do with his scheme, offense, than who he was bringing in as a defensive coordinator. New coach, probably going to have a different viewpoint on offense and defense. How does that change things for you? Or do you believe that the core group of players here you have now are flexible to be able to move and play in whatever and whoever you bring in here?
Yeah, Connor, that's a lesson I learned, again, just through this process and being a general manager. When you draft players or sign players, you want them to be versatile schematically, because as we see, today and previously, coaches come and go. It's just the reality of it. So, guilty of drafting a scheme-specific player before, and then coaches come and go, and then maybe those decisions don't work out. So, due to that lesson I learned throughout this process, try to make it where these players are able to be versatile enough to fit into whatever scheme we're in, and I feel like the players on the roster right now can do that.
How will you handle?
Let me get Charlotte. Sorry.
What did you learn about the search process the first time that's going to change how you approach it this go around?
Having this runway has really helped. There's not a lot of positives of making a in-season coaching change, but having this runway to really do a deep dive on a wide array of candidates. Sit in my office and watch Thursday press conferences for coordinators. Integration of AI on some things that we've utilized. Calling around. Again, it's hard when you're an assistant general manager somewhere and you're on a playoff run. You don't have a job yet to call around and do the amount of research that we can do. When I got hired, I didn't have an assistant general manager. I really didn't have a staff to assist me. So it's going to be a very thorough search. I feel really good about the information we've collected already. There's some really good candidates. Again, on both sides of the ball, collegiately, we're going to look everywhere. So, and then going through it, Charlotte, like sitting in the seat as GM, having a head coach down the hallway. What are those interactions like throughout the calendar year? Post game after a win, post game after a loss, free agency, draft, the collaboration between the coaching staff and the personnel. What worked, what didn't work. So a lot of that stuff will help me because of the experience identify really what we're looking for in the next coach.
Joe, how will you handle? I believe most of your assistants, probably including Mike, are under contract for next year. How will you handle it if another team wants to interview one of those people as their search gets started? Versus, will you block them from doing that till your coach gets here, or how will you handle that?
Yeah, we've had those conversations. I've met a couple of times with the coaching staff in whole, and it's unique this year because the in-person interviews for candidates that are currently with clubs is the 19th in terms of in-person. So the cycle may be a little bit slower this year. So my conversations with coaches are like, listen, you got families, you're talking about kids. If something comes up, communicate with me, and it'll be on a case-by-case basis because we do have a lot of good coaches on the staff, and there's some that may be in the mix to continue with us, and again, timing and circumstances, it may not if they have something else.
Joe, of all the difficult things that a GM has to do, draft picks, free agents, fire people, hire people, is gauging, where do you put on the list of difficulty, gauging the coordinator, the hot coordinator out there, and projecting him to be the next head coach? Because sometimes they make it, very often they don't. So how do you, the established head coach, you kind of have a handle on the coordinator, projecting him to be the next guy?
Yeah, Paul, that's a good question. That's why there's probably more misses than hits, and you see this cycle where there's, the average I think is 7 a year in terms of coaches being fired. So the deep dive on the research, people that have worked with these individuals, I think is very important. Talking to players, player quotes on different coaches. If you're fortunate enough to get some players that maybe played under those guys, that's important. And then, the head coach has a track record. You want to know how they manage games, you can go bring up game management situations, which we've done that on some of these candidates. Game management's an important part of it. You can go see how they were in front of the media after wins, after losses, what their record was. It's right there, where they ranked offensively, defensively. So that's a little bit easier because the information there is for you versus a projection with a offense or defensive coordinator, or whoever it may be that hasn't been a head coach in the NFL before.
Joe, you talked about the research that you've done for the last 7 weeks. Are you guys ready to jump in? I mean, have you already sent out requests for interviews? I mean, are you starting, whether it's tomorrow or Wednesday or this week, to start your interviews for your search?
Yeah, we're going to start. When I leave here, we're going to go, map it out. I've been in player exit interviews from about 8:30 to 1:30, so just ran over here to do this, and then I have not seen ownership yet today. So again, I'm going to go from here right in there, and we're going to start mapping this out, and interviews will start this week.